bringing up things. The video assist in it is just spectacular. You can really see beautifully up closely with high definition screens the actual individual players that are playing.
I didn't see any cameras. Did you notice?
They're all hidden. I don't think you can see any of them. So here's the stage from close-up. You can see the line arrays, and the cameras are kind of built into the curvature of the walls behind little portals. So they had really, really good coverage of individual musicians and a good director who was, at a point where the piccolo has got a solo part, they would take the piccolo. So you get, here's...
I'm going to check something really quickly. I just want to see if I'm, a little louder than I expected here. But I got to turn my ears.
Yeah, but it's good to see you in from how's your vacation starting?
So far, so good. I walked about a mile this morning, 2 miles this morning on the beach. So it's good. Cool. It's good start.
There you go.
I'm just checking my audio real quickly because I changed a couple settings there. It looks like I'm coming in a little hot. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it down a little bit. Now I'm changing it, and it looks like it's now much closer to still maybe just a little hot, here. So I'll turn it down. So one of the things I noticed
me to ask you if you're on original sound.
I am on original audio, so I've set it to original audio, and I'm still coming in hot. And this is because I have noticed with the USB, with the Mix Pre 3, is that if I couldn't figure out why I was just slamming my limiters and still not getting to the right level. And if I have my USB output set to any, if I have 1 and 2, if they're not both set to my input 3, if one's set to something else, then it's going to be a lot less loud. So I think that I have to make sure that both of those are set. I noticed that's something at home, and I'm still coming in hot. So now if I start bringing this down, I'm going to bring it down to here. Now this may be too low, so I'm going to just keep talking, but it doesn't look like I'm that low. Well, now I'm low. So now I'm going to bring it back up again. And because what's happening is it's getting, on my side, it's just slamming the limiters, which just seemed really odd to me, that it was going to be so loud. And it was...
Ronnie, are you muted? Somebody's not muted.
Ronnie, I think we can hear you there. Typing. Somebody's typing, and we can hear them quite nicely. No, okay. Somebody's typing.
No, sorry, it was me getting ready for the open.
Okay,
and I was hearing a little bit of an echo, and it must have been coming from Bill's.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit here and just make sure that it's. It looks like I'm maybe just a touch hot, but I'm only tapping the limiters now on my end by having both those channels set to my third one. But when I had it set to another channel so that I could put something else. I imagine push something else in. But anyway. I am in a house of 12 people, so you may hear things in the background.
Yes, Original Family is on.
Original Family is on, yeah, exactly.
White balance is getting better, Alex.
Good. Yeah. It'll change over time because it's the morning.
Have a great show, everyone. Thank you all for being here, panelists. Appreciate it.
In a snowstorm.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can always find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Every day, our first hour is a general discussion of production and IT-related topics where we answer your questions. The second hour, typically, we take a deeper dive into a topic, and today we'll be talking about the business of maintaining and building business relationships outside of traditional advertising. So Monday is typically something where we do these kind of business-related questions, and we should have a good discussion today. So you'll be picking up tips, and we'll be trying to provide you tips on how to maintain and establish your business. That takes care of our second hour, but this is a first hour, general questions. And so, Courtney, what have we got?
Okay, first on deck here is from Samuel Nordvik in Norway. He says, what hub do you recommend to get a few extra USB Type A for peripherals on a Mac Mini M1?
All right, Alex, start us off.
I tend to lean into the OWC hubs. So the hubs, the various hubs that are available there, generally tend to be some of the best solutions that we've seen out there. I have played with a lot of other ones I have ones from Anchor, Geffen, Saatchi, I think. And I've just found that the ones that have the best build quality as well as the most consistent performance are a variety of the ones from OWC. You have to look at them all to decide which one is specifically the right one for you. But I would recommend that brand.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. Their engineering typically turns out to be really solid, and they have such a wide variety that you get everything from the little bus-powered travel docks all the way up to multi-port docks. Courtney, your thoughts?
And you might look for one that it may not help you out depending on the type of power supply that you have, since they've gone back to MagSafe, I think, on the new M1s, that pass power through. There's some that you can use a USB-C type power supply and go into one of the USB-C ports that will pass power through to the Mac over the USB-C connector. So that might be a better way for you. That way that makes sure that you have all your peripherals that are plugged into those A-type USB ports are getting full power coming from the power supply rather than draining your battery.
Yeah, I was surprised when I got my newer Mac Pro M2 here recently. They had taken away one of the USB-C ports I had on my previous model. There used to be 4 USB-C/Thunderbolt ports. They put MagSafe back in. They took out one of those ports, and then they put also an HDMI feedback in. And at first, I was really confused because I was so used to having those 4 ports, and that my whole system was configured around driving that. Eventually, I found out I could do everything that I could do with the old one, but it was a confusion moment for a little bit as I was getting things hooked up. So, yeah, do look into whichever thing you go to. Make sure that you know exactly how to configure everything and get what you want. Let's go to the next question.
Coming in from Brooklyn, New York, and Mike Edwards. He asked, morning, everyone. Is there any sense in using a Blackmagic 4K switcher and capturing 4K in camera only to stream in HD? Is the picture quality that much better or not worth the upgrade? Thanks again. Alex,
start us off.
Yeah, I typically do that. So I typically am capturing in 4K and then going back down. It's great to have that recording. It is great to have the recording that's there at 4K, and also the oversampling does look better at 1080p. So it will look, your image will look better at 1080p than if you started there. If you start at 4K and you now have a record at 4K, if someone comes back and says, "Oh, I really wish I had a higher resolution version," usually you're putting a lot of money into production. It's worth capturing in 4K so that you have it in the future.
Ronnie Hofsaway.
Yeah, same from us. We always capture in 4K and record and archive in 4K in case the client comes back and want us to do some changes. And then even if you republish in 1080, you still have an option of zooming in and doing smooth transitions or effects on the 4K source material.
Mike, hopefully that took care of your question. Let's move on to the next one.
This one comes in from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. He says, it has been interesting to play with for a radio show idea. Any suggestions for other similar tools to look at? And he has a link that points to videoask.com.
Alex.
It looks like a very limited platform to me. So when I looked at it, it allows you to ask these questions and allows you to put those in. But I felt like it was a very I'd rather have people just use their camera, record a video, and upload it than to use that platform. From what I saw, now you may see something different than what I saw there, but it seemed to be, it's a very limited set of things, and it's kind of pushing you through a pipeline that I don't know if I would want to do. So I maybe I'm missing something, but when I looked at it, and I haven't used it, I've only gone through their website and really looked at what they had there, but it looked like it was going to be kind of a web-driven kind of process that was going to be somewhat limiting. I'd rather have people just pull out their phones, and that's what we've done in the last decade.
I don't know why, but it's so weird for me to hear the idea of radio show. I mean, I started in radio, and that was my first love in broadcasting. But now with everything moving to podcasting and things like that, it feels
well, and it may be a
kind
radio-like show. I mean, he may not mean. Yeah. I don't know if he means radio show, actual radio show. But one of the things I will say is that the getting people to send in questions via audio or video, very valuable. It's great because you can preview what they're going to say and then just play it out and answer it. So it's a great tool to use. I'm definitely not saying you shouldn't use recorded submissions. Those are really cool, but I would be careful of using them as I don't think I would need this platform to do that. In the past, we've just told people to put them up on YouTube. We use a program, I think we mentioned this yesterday, called Downy. We just pull them all out, run them into our production after that.
Absolutely. Courtney, you had some thoughts?
So if this is only recorded submissions, I was wondering if it's a way for like a radio show to do pre-screening, or like normally a call screener would go through the calls coming in and see what they wanted to ask and line them up. And this looks like it would take their information and queue up their video so that someone could go through and screen them and make sure they're all okay before putting them on the air.
Yeah, which is a pretty important thing. We've all had issues with folks figuring they can get into a stream of something and causing a little bit of
Baba booey.
a little bit of issues.
I think that even in general, I will say that I know that there is a culture of doing this where we're going to take live callers and everything else. As a listener, I hate it. I don't even care if they're being problematic. They just can't get to the point. Just come on, you're just say what you want to say. And, and so I find I can't listen to shows like that anymore. I just can't listen to them talk, and so people can't get to the point fast enough. And so they're not trained to do this, and they just start going around the house like 4 times before they go through the front door. So I love records because you can decide. You can even edit them.
It was interesting for me because when I was starting to do a lot with professional speakers, what I discovered was I thought it was the people who couldn't kind of get their thoughts together. Then I remember one day I had to record somebody incredibly bright, but terrible as a speaker because he would keep doing dependent clauses. He would be saying the first thing he was going to say, and then he would have another thought, and he'd depend that to it, and also this. And we got like 7 levels deep, and I wanted to get back to what he originally said. So sometimes it's not an indication of intelligence. It's just the way you present. And the presenters on most of the video and radio shows work in complete thoughts, and they're satisfying that way. It's hard to do.
Most people who are really smart are actually the worst because they want to qualify everything because they say, well, this isn't because it depends. But then they start adding all the it depends into their question. And the people who are good at this are good at understanding sound bites. I'm going to say something specific. The ones that the scientists who become known in the media are good at saying, I know it depends, but I'm still going to just say what I'm going to say.
Right.
Alex will probably have to find you a 12-step program for people addicted to 1.5 speed playback on YouTube.
1.5. Why would you listen to it so slowly? I mean, like 1.5 is. I don't
2X are the heavily addicted. Yes.
I'm only at 1.2. That means my future is dead here.
I'm moving towards 2.5 right now. It's so great. You see something that says a half an hour read, and you're like, oh, that's only going to be 15 minutes.
There we go. All right, let's move on to the next question.
From Austin, Texas, and Paul Wallace, he says, Bill Gates, Reddit's CEO, and other tech leaders are increasingly talking about their corpus. What do they mean? It has to do with AI?
We're going to go to our AI pundit here. John, tell us what's going on, John Brado.
Corpus is the standard definition for corpus, which is a collection of text. And so when they're, GPT stands for generative pre-trained, transformer. So pre-trained means they have a collection, a corpus of text that they build their model upon. And so Reddit was a good place for them to scrape all the stuff. And that's what's happening on Twitter right now, with Elon saying that he's trying to prohibit people from scraping the data. Everything on the web they can scrape, like Wikipedia, all that stuff builds a corpus of their models for AI. And so GPT 3.5 is built on a corpus of about 750 gigabytes, which is compressed. So the more information they can get into their, as a collection of their corpus into the model, the more powerful their model is going to be. That's what corpus means.
And it's just Latin for body, so that makes sense. Alex.
Yeah, and one of the big things that Twitter brings to all of these systems is timely data. So timely data, is Reddit is the same, the same fight that they're having here, is being, right now, 3.5, John, correct me if I'm wrong, goes to like the middle of 2021. Is that right? I mean,
September 2021.
Yeah. So the issue is that it's really good at answering questions from the past, but it doesn't know what's happening right now. And of course, that's where they want to take it, is that you can ask a question about something that's happened yesterday and you'd have that information. And the folks that are generating the content for yesterday don't want to give it out without getting money for it. So that's, so they're going to, and they know that that is a lever that they can turn, and so we're getting caught up in how they figure out how to do that. But you can see why they might want to control that.
Next question.
From Tlaloc, sorry, my tongue, it's early in the morning. Tlaloc Lopez Waterman from Brevard, North Carolina. And Tlaloc says, Bill, we were not able to see your images of the new venue in San Diego. Can you give us a short tour? We were looking at before the show started.
I did not set this up for any kind of presentation. I just was so excited to have been there. I will show you a couple of slides. This is actually a night shot of the facility. It's called the Rady Shell, and is a huge kind of specialized fabric oval thing. Has an astonishing sound system built into it, and you can see on the left and right there are gigantic, very high definition, very bright screens, which really does make for an astonishingly fabulous concert experience. Let me push up a little closer. You can see the symphony down there at the bottom, getting ready, I think, to play some Rachmaninoff at this point. Fabulous sound, fabulous array, state-of-the-art everything. And I'm trying to find like maybe one more picture to show you what it's kind of like. There we go. That one will do. There's, from the audience point of view, where I was sitting. So you've got these huge screens, you've got this beautiful facility, and you've got San Diego's Mission Bay with the boats floating past. It was truly an exceptional concert experience. So congratulations to the city of San Diego for making it possible for this beautiful venue. It was a fabulous evening. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. He says, has anyone tried the new OWC Atlas SD memory cards?
I don't think that anybody has. At least no one has raised a hand on it. I mean, we all trust OWC in terms of their engineering and their consistency of being able to produce good products. So I'm going to assume that it's as good as everything else that they've made. And I've had nothing but good experiences with all their things. In fact, their little NVMe quick drive that I use with my MacBook Air has been just one of the simplest and easiest and most affordable storage solutions I found. Alex, what are your thoughts?
It looks really good. I mean, the thing is, I have the confidence. A lot of times you see these kinds of things and you're not sure if is that company really going to produce something that's worthwhile. And the fact that the price is really good, and the fact that OWC is making it, definitely, I'm going to try them. I haven't tried them yet because I have a lot of SD cards laying around, but a 1 terabyte in my camera might be a useful one. So I'm looking at that.
Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was looking at the price was $260 for a 1 terabyte. I'd be nervous about losing that. That's U3, so it's very high speed in that size. So you could record, I guess, higher resolutions. I don't know, Alex, will that do 12K at that speed?
No, you don't. But you wouldn't expect an SD card to be able to do 12K. I mean, I think that the write speed is 130 megs a second, so it's going to be reasonable, kind of slower speeds. Your unique CFast cards or hard drives or other things that are going to, I mean, when you're talking not even 12K, but 8K, you're talking 800, 900 megs a second, and you're not expecting that kind of performance out of an SD card.
Could easily do 4K compressed.
Yeah. And compressed, not like a ProRes 4K though.
Ronnie?
The only problem with OWC is they have too many good products, and it's really hard to choose the right one.
Yeah, I was going to say I probably have 4 of their products now, and every time I get a new machine, I think, is this the right tool for that? No, I think I need this other one. So you end up buying more, but there you go. That's a business model. Next question.
Comes in from Gordon Lake in LA. Says your niece was told to call you to get into production. What do you say to her?
Sure, I'd love to talk to you. Alex, what would you say?
Yeah. I think that typically finding them a space as a production assistant is usually the place that you get started. Like that's, I think a lot of people want to do something other than production assistant, but I think being a production assistant for months, maybe short years, is really healthy for someone to kind of get a sense of how larger productions work. And then the other thing I would look at what your niece actually wants to do. What does she want to end up doing? And if she wants to do something with cameras or other things, then get some simple versions of that and start doing things with it. Get out there and work on it, volunteer for shows, do whatever you can to, like there's lots of people making little short films and other things and student projects. And you want to get as tied into that as you can. Because the big thing is especially when you're young and you don't have a lot of other things over your head, you want to stay as busy as you can and make as many connections as you can and learn as much as you can as you move forward. I had my brother was trying to get into the business, and he went to school for audio, but I said he should try cameras, and he worked for me a little while. Now he's a Steadicam, the A Steadicam for a lot of features, so in TV shows, and so it is useful, and this is where I think it's funny. I was talking to someone about yesterday about this. They inherited what they did from their father, and he inherited from there. And I was like, so you're a Nepo baby, and they're like, and they were like, well, and everything. I was like, the thing is that 100 years ago, we were all doing what our parents did, or what our family did. And so you always want to try to help your family out. And but again, you want to also be as harsh as you can you can have a conversation with them that most people can't about needing to be performance oriented and how to be in the industry and how to be successful in those areas. But giving them that guidance is definitely an advantage over someone who hasn't done any production at all.
Courtney?
I wouldn't shy away from giving some pointers and what to do and what not to do. All that information. I'd be very careful though about recommending them to one of your clients. That carries a lot of baggage. If you do have your own production company, you could certainly bring the niece in, start them as a production assistant, or bring them online, even in a paid position if she really knows what she's doing. If you have your own production company, you're kind of set. I'd be careful about recommending them to something who you do contract work for, because everybody hates to get that call. Oh, do you have a spot for my nephew's in town and he really needs to get to work in the production business, etc. I'd worry about alienating your current client.
Alex, you had a follow-up.
Yeah, I agree with Courtney that you definitely want to see what your niece or nephew is like before you start recommending them. And again, I would never put them on a production that I wasn't on to start with, so that they have to answer to me and I can give them lots of, stuff. But I would, again, not have them, I'd make them earn it, like earn what's there, and be probably harsher with them than I would with a normal person, just because they're family and you want them to be successful, and it reflects on you. So I would tell them that as they walked in, like, what you do reflects on me, so don't mess it up. So there's no pressure. But I think that it's a good opportunity there. But I definitely wouldn't be trying to get them any deals other than the opportunity to work really hard for not very much.
Let's go to the next question.
From Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, John Fisher says, can the panel recommend a wireless HDMI system for my Mac Mini M2 that would allow me to use a 1080 TV across the room as an independent display? I don't want to cast an existing display over AirPlay.
Alex?
I believe there's one called HDNet. I haven't used these recently, but I think it's called HDNet. But there's a lot of HDMI transmitters that'll transmit through walls and so on and so forth. If you're talking 20 or 30 feet, there's a lot of things on Amazon, and they're all going to work pretty well. You don't need anything high level or professional. You should be able to find something under $100 that will do this to TVs, especially at 1080p. The 4K ones are a little bit more dicey, but 1080p across the room. Again, I thought that it was HDNet that I downloaded or that I bought in the past, but I haven't needed one for a while. And it's just taking the HDMI signal. The only thing you may have to do is convert that HDMI signal to a true TV signal from the computer if it doesn't lock in correctly. That might be the only part that is a little bit more difficult.
There you go. Hopefully that helped, John. Let's move to the next question.
From Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina. He says, I've begun to see a change in sailing YouTube channels because of Starlink. I'm currently following an Atlantic crossing that has daily updates 36 hours behind. What other verticals might be affected by this remote technology?
Well, Alex, give us some thoughts.
Well, I think that hiking, off-roading, these kinds of things have a whole new, and going to different parts of the world, islands and so on, I think have a whole new opportunity that we just didn't have before. There are a lot of places where we just didn't stream because there was no way to get the signal out. I actually I'm on an island right now. So I brought a Starlink, and we're going to be testing it a little later this week just to see what happens. But there's just so much of the world that we don't see live. Because we had to bring a sat truck or we had to bring something else, and now we have our own little sat truck. So I think that there's places like Yosemite or Yellowstone or other things like that never had very good bandwidth, and we used to when we broadcasted from places like that, we would spend $10,000 a day or $8,000 a day on a sat truck, and then we would go wireless to that and make that work. And so this is going to be, I think, make it a lot more casual than it has been in the past.
Courtney.
Well, a follow-up question for Alex, since he has the Starlink there. Did they ever get it worked out where you could use Starlink from a moving vehicle, like put it on top of your RV and still have a signal connected while you're on the road?
Yeah, there's a mobile version of it. I think it's the newer antenna. I don't think version 1 or 2 will do the mobile. Version 2 might do mobile. Version 1 will not. But there is a mobile subscription that you can get that is designed to be moving and I've heard. The fastest I've heard anybody that I know use that dish is about 450 miles an hour in the air. So at altitude. You're
going to get a speeding ticket for that, Mister.
Yeah. So at altitude. But it definitely is. It's revolutionizing a lot of different industries in that area. There's a lot of verticals there that once you can do that, I think that we might end up with better internet coverage, on planes like United or other things like that. If they start, they are in discussions about Starlink there. But this also has, of course, military applications as well, to have something that you can put into planes to get a better transmission.
If you get a little backpack, you could do your own Tour de France coverage, right along with the ride.
Yeah, I mean, it really is down to something where I'm curious about their coverage over places because there still has to be downlink stations, and so it depends on in France it might work, and obviously the Ukraine it has been incredibly important. Starlink has made a huge difference in the war in Ukraine of providing on the ground information and so on and so forth. But I look at places like, well, it'd be really good to go on safari and be in Ruaha in Tanzania and be able to uplink live feeds at 4K or whatever. But the problem is I don't think in those areas yet there's the downlink stations to provide that. But it'll be really interesting when we start getting enough downlink stations that we can start seeing some of that happening in really remote parts of the world.
You heard it here first. Someday it's going to be John Preto coming to us from a yurt in Papua New Guinea, and it'll all be easy to do. Let's go to the next question.
Next one from Roz McNulty in Vancouver, Canada. It says, I'm overwhelmed by newsletters that I don't get around to reading. I would like a solution that turns it into a magazine or content group that I can read on my iPad. Any software recommendations?
Ronnie Hofsoy.
Well, we're playing with some of these stuff using ChatGPT and automation through something called Pipedream. And you receive an email, parse the content, put it into a structured format using JavaScript, and then send it over to ChatGPT's APIs, and even have it transcribed. So there are ways to do it. You have to put in some effort. I do not know of any systems that do this good today automatically. You have to configure it.
Alex?
They have an RSS feed. So a lot of these folks have, things that are RSS. There's some readers. So there's obviously Reader, which is the RSS reader. But there's also things like, I use a thing called Flipboard, and Flipboard allows me to subscribe to people's channels, and so now I just get them as it basically feels like you're reading them on your iPad or on your iPhone. And I've been using Flipboard almost since it came out. I can't remember how long it's been, but it's been over a decade. Well, maybe 15 years of using Flipboard. And it's something we're actually looking at for office hours of just having, news and other things coming out because it's relatively easy to publish to as well. Now, when it started, I was really excited. I was like, I want to publish to Flipboard, and they didn't have any tools for it. But now it's gotten much easier. But a lot of folks who have those, finding an RSS reader of some kind, if they have RSS distribution, or using something like Flipboard and subscribing from there, can oftentimes get you that feel that I think you're looking for.
And I think I was surprised when I subscribed to Apple Plus originally that they managed to put a pretty big magazine component in there. It's not entirely searchable and things like that, but they have a large list of magazines that come with a subscription. So the majors, Newsweek, Time, those kind of things are usually there, and you get a digital version of that every month kind of wrapped into the subscription. So that's another way to get access to some of your magazines if the ones you're looking for are in that service. Let's go to the next question.
This one comes in from Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado, and she says, we use Unity Cloud Intercom on Zoom meetings. Sometimes my Bluetooth in-ear speaker's volume is too low when selected in both Unity and Zoom. Only selected in either, the volume is good. I need to use wireless in-ears. How can I fix this?
Ronnie Hofsaway starts us off.
Well, on Mac, you could use Audio Hijack from Rogue Amoeba as a paid software to do these mixes and auto docking like I do in this show. I have intercom going over the other sound if someone speaks to me on intercom, and automatically lowers everything else. And you can also use that to adjust volumes and gain it a little bit more if you need.
Alex?
Yeah, I think it's the potato or whatever on the PC that will let you do the mixing. I don't remember what it is, but it's the potato or the orange or the lemon that does the one on the PC. But on the Mac, as Ronnie said, Audio Hijack or Loopback will let you sit there and play with how those go out. And I think that you definitely mixing it, not letting Bluetooth just do it for you, but mixing it, and creating a mix for yourself that goes out is going to be more effective.
And let's not forget, questions are still open. If you have any ideas that you want to toss into the hopper that we can answer today, we'd love to see those questions. And as always, be sure to vote your favorite questions up. The questions that have the largest number of votes, we spend the most time talking about and get to the quickest. So remember that you're programming this show. And let's get on to the next question.
Another one from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman for Bill from Brevard, North Carolina. He says, Bill, do you think those image screens that you were showing earlier were 4K? And how latent did it feel? Did any latency register to you?
I think they were at least 4K. They were beautiful. They were incredibly bright, as befits something where you're starting a concert off in the later afternoon and there's plenty of ambient light to deal with. There was no latency whatsoever. And I know that simply because you're listening to the music and you've got fine close-ups of maybe a violinist fingering the fingerboard during the course of a solo or something like that, and I detected no latency whatsoever. Now, I can't speak of that. We were fortunate enough, we were in the first maybe 5 or 6 tables from the front, so we had the most line away adjacency that I think you could get. Now, maybe somebody back at the back, they did have towers, and I'm sure there were delays on them, but whether or not that creates an offset between what you're visually seeing and the music, That's a possibility that I didn't experience, but I will say they did an exceptional job with that. Courtney?
Yeah, usually they do have to structure delays on towers on a big outdoor venue like that, because if you're sitting in some of those pictures that you showed of the grass seats, there looks like about 800, 1,000 feet away. You're going to have at least a second delay or so just naturally as the sound comes from those arrays over the stage, unless they have arrays that are pre-delayed. In other words, the delays in the stage are greater further away from you than they are closer to you. So it's going to be kind of hard to judge, because the light coming from those screens, which you're seeing with your eyeballs, is traveling a lot faster than the sound that's traveling through the air.
Yeah, on the wide shots, and that was a shot I took of my wife standing in the back, you can see it's a pretty long distance, so I can't believe that there's not significant delay back for the very affordable grass area seats in the venue. Ronnie Hofsoy.
Well, normally on iMac, that big, it's a huge cost for each panel. So normally it's not 4K, but it could be. And of course, if you're sitting far in the back, there is no point of having it 4K, even if it's huge. So I guess they have planned this well and have everything in 4K, at least up to the displays.
Let me show you one more picture. This is literally from my iPhone of a close-up of the gentleman who did the trumpet solo. He was one of the guest artists, and you can see literally plenty of hair detail. They were just tack sharp and incredibly bright. So I don't think they spared much expense in terms of whatever the state of the art is out there at this point. They seem to put that in there. Beautiful facility. Let's go to the next question.
From Breckenridge, Colorado, we have a question from Jack Rappel, and he says, can they live stream ambisonic AURL 3D spatial or Atmos audio from that venue? Aural 3D, I guess it is.
Oh, they're talking about the same thing I was just showing you. I do not know. My suspicion is that not now, like all venues these days, they took disability awareness very much to heart. So there's plenty of assisted listening possibilities, but I didn't see or hear anybody on any kind of a headset that would allow for more spatial audio. They did have speaker arrays, but I just can't speak to the technology of where they're doing multiple point sources and any kind of 5.1 or anything like that. It sounded, all I know is that it sounded magnificent. Particularly what really gobsmacked me was when we were seeing a close-up of something like the concertmaster's fingers as she was playing a beautiful solo. It seemed entirely organic. I was getting to watch the musicians play, and nothing seemed out of sync to me as an audience member. So however they accomplished that, they did a great job. Let's go to the next question.
Coming in from Brody Hefner in New York City, he says, last week, Courtney reported on SMPTE's in-depth comparison of HBO-approved cinema cameras. What insights from that experience are useful to those of us not using those high-end cameras?
Courtney, you raised your hand on this one.
Well, one insight would be that they even approved a 6,000 or what is the 12K? The Ursa Mini 12K from Blackmagic. They approved that for actual production on their HBO dramatically produced, for their TV series that they produce for HBO and HBO Max. So that's interesting. And they pointed out that, the lens cap for an Arri Alexa cost more than the Blackmagic 12K. But in the comparisons that I saw, it held up pretty well. I think the color renditions were a little bit better on the Arri Alexa. Their color science is good. And the Venice 2, the Sony Venice 2 is making a lot of inroads there too, because it has the Rialto version, which lets you separate the image sensor from the recorder and all the electronics, processing electronics and batteries, et cetera. So that's what they used on Top Gun, the most recent Top Gun film, to mount 3 of them in the cockpit of the jets that they were using to shoot all the pilots for that movie. So, and it looked pretty good. So it's amazing that you can get them into very compact situations. They spent a boatload of money on this stuff. I bet it cost a couple of $1 million to produce this test, because they built sets a la Wes Anderson with 2-story tall sets and a sound stage that were cut away completely, so you could see, 2 floors, four or 5 rooms simultaneously, and they lit each room differently. One with sunlight coming through, one was a dark bedroom that kids watching TV, one was an attic with light streaming through one window, and one was a kitchen scene where you had a lot of like white refrigerator. It was set in the 50s motif. And that way you got to see all 4 lighting situations for each camera. And that was the test that they did for elasticity, where they would they'd shoot several takes up to 4 stops over and 4 stops under, and then in post-production, bring them back into the usable range. And one thing it lets you know is that these cameras are all capable of doing that, with one exception. One of the cameras they compared was 35 millimeter film camera running 5219, 500 ASA fine grain film. That didn't hold up very well.
Really? Oh my gosh.
All the digital cameras, yeah, you started to see a lot of noise when they underexposed it by 4 stops and brought it back. It was pretty much unusable, I'd say. They also did a night, they flew to Australia to shoot these exterior scenes from a drone under moonlight. So they put all 5 of these cameras through their paces, lit only by moonlight. And that was amazing. Some of those cameras could deliver perfectly usable imagery, lit only by moonlight on a boat that's traveling at high speed. And they shot these from a huge drone that could carry 2 cameras at the same time. And then it went over a house that was lit from inside. So it handled, everything from moonlight in that one scene through people traveling in a car on the beach with no light on them, just shot from another vehicle into the car, into like a dune buggy, into 4 people, and with the area Lexus and the red probably had the best image, I think, for low light level. It was amazing. Had an amazing array of dynamic range on that camera. And you could see perfectly usable. You could see the people in the car having a good time. When they cut to the film, it's like, are there people there? I can't see amongst all that grain. They had to push the film 2 stops just to try and get an image on it. Otherwise, it's just a black screen. In fact, they had to use the Blackmagic as a viewfinder, Blackmagic camera as a viewfinder for the film camera, because they couldn't see anything through the video assist on the film camera, and shooting under moonlight was just a black screen. So
is your opinion after watching this that now digital has outstripped film technology entirely for all the cinematographers who were there?
Yeah, I mean, for some situations, film still might be good, and there's a few holdout directors who insist on shooting everything in 35 millimeter film, or now IMAX. Nolan. So there will be those directors that like to shoot film. They don't usually finish on film. Only Christopher Nolan, I think, is doing that. That is crazy. But in other words, staying on film through post-production rather than transferring the negative directly to digital and finishing the rest of the film and post-production digitally. But these digital cameras have a broader dynamic range than 35 millimeter film does. The skin tones, film gives you that nostalgic look. If you're going for that, archival look, or you're cutting together a documentary or something you're going to cut together a lot of archival footage or something with film, and you want it to all look the same. You might want to shoot on film for that reason. But these cameras, they're kind of expensive, except for the 12K, but can deliver a perfectly usable image in almost any lighting condition, and still have it recovered. Most of those digital cameras, when they did they called it the sensitivity or the elasticity footage, where they overexposed by 4 stops at 1 stop each, and then underexposed by 4 stops. So that's an 8-stop range of shooting. They could correct it back to a perfectly usable image without any problems with all the all 4 of the digital cameras. So couldn't do that with the film.
Wow. Alex, you had notes?
Yeah, just as a note, I was able to talk to someone recently about the Super 35, the newer version of the Airy, and they had just spent 5 months shooting with it, and they were super happy with it. They just said it's their favorite camera to shoot on now. Just said the range is unbelievable. Like that's there. So I think we're really seeing a point where the digital cameras have outstripped it. And the one thing I will say is that IMAX, if you're shooting for IMAX, that film is still higher resolution than most of our cameras, the digital cameras. So you're not, I think that they say that the theoretical resolution of IMAX is 17K, so, or 16 to 18K, depending on how you look at it. So I think that it's still, when you're shooting for IMAX, that's going to be delivered back to IMAX. There are some advantages to shooting on film, but that's probably the only place that there's an advantage to shooting on film.
And there are a dwindling number of film projected IMAX theaters left in America. Almost all the IMAX theaters have converted to digital, and it's not anywhere near that.
But when you have it, it's so great.
Yeah. Alex, you buy your own IMAX projector and hire a projection.
Yeah, I have one sitting in the house. I have one sitting in the back of the house. I got to tell you,
reels.
Yeah, they're crazy. If you've ever been in a projectionist booth with IMAX, it's just these giant wheels of film. It's
massive celluloid. Oh my gosh! Wow, this is very cool. Well, interesting that we've all lived to see this almost completion of the transfer from celluloid to digital in our lifetimes. Let's go on to the next question.
From Eduardo Augustine in Panama, Pennsylvania. How do you travel with your Starlink when not using an RV? Good question for
Alex.
Yeah, so I checked it. So I put it in. I have a suitcase, and I kept it came in a box, and it had kind of a formed fitting thing in it, a little bit of a Tetris thing to remember how they packed it. But you fold down the arm and you put it in there, and then I packed I pack all my clothes in these little bricks, these Eagle Creek like cube system. And I put them all around it to package it. And then I close the thing up. And then I wrote on the suitcase for TSA. I was like, open this side up. Do not open this side, up, and so there's like little gaff tape with silver writing on all over the thing to make sure that they understood what needed to happen. And so now it's here. And again, we're going to test it today or tomorrow. So we'll see how it goes.
Cool. Let's head off to the next question.
Comes in from Tim Peters in Tehachapi, California. He says, what type of remote controlled pan and tilt would you use with a small format Blackmagic camera in an auditorium? He says the cameras would be controlled by an 8K Constellation.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that we've used, what I've used in the past is the telemetrics heads, which are very nice, but they're more expensive than that camera most likely. So what you can look at, depending on which camera you're talking about, I am about to start testing this camera. This is a Sony camera, but we work with the Blackmagic with the RS2. I have an old RS2 laying around. This is a DJI. And so I know some folks have been playing with the RS2 and the RS3 as far as a small pan and tilt. In fact, I think Ronnie has done some of that testing there. So I'll let him jump in if he wants to talk about that. But I think that's an option as far as being able to put something together that's less expensive. But there's a lot of pan and tilt solutions that are in that $1,000 to $4,000 range for pan and tilt heads. But the telemetrics that I'm talking about is $15,000 a head, so it's a little more expensive.
Ronnie?
Yeah, we played a little bit with this. You need a box. I'll leave the link in Mukana afterwards to interface between the whatever you want to control it with and do the automatic tracking, so to speak. So there's a lot of options if you want to hack it, and you can easily purchase a used RS2 or even a RS to get this working. You don't need the newest versions.
Courtney.
One thing to take into account, though, is if you have a remote pan tilt head, is do they pass SDI through the head, and you'll need two SDI links to go to that camera if you're going to control it, don't you? With the return feed from the Constellation to control the color science and its and all the other controls.
Okay,
you still have to do that. You're controlling for the less expensive versions. You'd still be controlling the camera's shading separately from the head. It's not really an integrated solution. for that process. But you can, again, when you get into the more expensive heads, all of that stuff passes through. But on the less expensive heads, it won't.
You just have to kind of tether the wires so that they don't interfere with the pan tilt. Yes, nice.
Yes.
Useful information. Your vote, remember, is important. I'm not sure we're going to get through everything. We'll keep pushing diligently to try to do that, but vote on questions. We have a couple of questions in for the business relationship second hour, so remember that you can add those as well now and give the panel time to cogitate on them a little bit before we get into the second hour. Next question.
Comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, when would you use a line isolator as opposed to a DI box?
Well, sometimes it has to do with you getting noise and things like that, and isolating circuits can help you eliminate that problem. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, humbucker is a lot of times what it's called, to isolate an audio channel to go through a transformer or sometimes even through an opto isolator so that it makes sure that there's no electrical connections between the input and the output. The ground loops tend to, especially if you're using unbalanced things like guitar pickups and so on, which tend to just pick up a lot of hum. So that's one reason. The DI box will help you isolate that. Depends on the DI box. Sometimes they can have that isolation built in through opto isolation or through transformer isolation. But sometimes these days, most of them, I think, are just op amps that are in there that are amplifying the signal.
Ronnie Hofsoy.
Yeah, and one other thing to think of, the DI boxes is normally for taking a balanced signal and making it an unbalanced signal and making it balanced. Whereas the need for going out from a professional mixer with balanced audio is also to have it become unbalanced, going into, for instance, the ATEM switchers. And we always use the radial J-ISO boxes with high quality transformers to do the transformation of both the signal level and going from balanced to unbalanced. So that's a good solution and has always kept our production noise free.
Thank you, Ronnie. And let's go to the next question.
From Tommy Schatz in St. Paul, Minnesota, does anyone on the panel use multiple networks with the same computer for production?
Alex.
Yeah, we've often used multiple networks. And so you can have, basically, you can have an Ethernet connection that comes with your computer, but then you can take a USB to Ethernet and do another version of that. And that'll help, have given you that separate network. Oftentimes for us, one network is often internal or something like Dante, and the other network is the general internet network. And so you can kind of break those up and decide which ones you're going to use there.
Makes sense. Next question.
Coming in from New York City, David Brady asked, what would cause Bluetooth headset to toggle between stereo and mono when paired to my Mac? I can't determine if it's the app in use or what. I have an aggregate audio device built that I use with SoundDesk, and the left and non-mic mic bud often drops.
So he's got some monitoring issues. Alex, thoughts?
Yeah, I would take a look at what you're, for these kinds of things, I would you have to back up and go, okay, when is it in stereo? When is it in mono? And then just change one thing at a time and see what it generates there. I think that's the issue there.
All right. Hopefully, David, that gives you something to look at. Let's go to the next question.
Coming in from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, what brand of power bricks do you keep in your bag?
Ooh, Alex.
Yeah, I have. I'm looking at the one that I have here. This is the Hyperjuice, and the Hyperjuice one seems to work with everything more effectively. And so there's a Hyperjuice, and then I use these Weibo ones that are like 240 watts or 200 watts, but most of them are USB-C. I usually have at least 3 USB-Cs. Along with they got to be 100-watt connections, at least 200-watt connections on them. I don't carry anything else just because it's really problematic.
Courtney?
I like the Anchor products, and I'd usually use those if I can find them for both AC powered and for DC backup, battery powered lithium ion backups as well. Anchor makes it.
Yeah, for remote stuff, I got one of the bigger, newer Anchor ones, and I really like it because it has enough actually to do the modern laptops, the M series laptops. So it has some decent, I think it's pretty close to 100 watts, maybe 95 or something like that. So not only can I do all the devices, but if my laptop is running low, it'll handle that in the new form. Ronnie Hossoy?
Yeah, just make sure it's not that big that you can fly with it. There is limitations on the air security, and you always have to have it on the carry-on.
Wise advice. Let's move on to the next question.
This one comes in from Joe Phillips in Murphy, North Carolina. Corsair recently announced a Stream Deck goes free, up to 6 keys on their mobile app, free forever. What are your thoughts on this freemium app model? Useful for app publishers in our community, and he has a link to the Corsair newsroom.
Alex, do you use this?
I'm actually really interested in that. I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to use my phone more often with that specifically. This week I'm trying to get the Stream Deck stuff. Now I've already paid for the Stream Deck one, so I think that this is a great idea for giving people a handful of keys. 6 keys would let you run your Keynote, would let you do a lot of other things that you might want to do there. So I think it's a great idea. And again, I've already paid for it, so it's too late for me. But I think that I'm trying to get that to work. I bought it, and I really haven't used it, and now I'm trying to figure out how to use it in this environment to mute, unmute, that kind of thing while I'm on the road. So it's going to be interesting. We'll take a look at it. I'll let you know how it works by the end of the week.
So, Joe, that gives you a little tickler file thing. Stop back in a week or so and ask Alex how it's coming along. Let's move to the next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, he asked, what remote access app would you suggest for controlling your Mac from an iPad? Would there be any equivalent to Parsec that works from an iOS client?
Alex?
AnyDesk will work from your phone. So I've actually logged into a computer with AnyDesk on my phone and just moved around and selected things and so on and so forth. I don't know if other ones do that, but the AnyDesk works great from an iOS device.
Next question.
From Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina. Courtney, what speed film did they use for the film test? Was it a fair comparison, referring to the SMPTE test, of course?
Take it away, Courtney.
Yes, they use 5219 color negative for the which I think is rated at ASA 500. They rated it at 500. They did push it 2 stops for the moonlight test. So, and they went to Photochem and they talked to them about how to try and make it, just get it on the, in the neighborhood. And they said, well, we can push it 2 stops without it turning completely to mush. But still, it turned completely to mush. The problem is the grain size. When you push that 500 ASA, which has a pretty large grain size to begin with, 2 stops, it's going to get real noisy, and you could see it. I mean, some of the cameras did get quite a bit noisy when they underexposed by 4 stop. You could see a lot of noise come up in some of the sensors, especially the higher resolution sensors like the 12K. But that actually did pretty well. You didn't see the I take that back, not the 12K, the Monstro or the Sony. You saw a little bit more noise. When they underexposed at 4 stops and brought it back up, it brings the noise up by 4 stops. So there's that problem. But yeah, it's as fair a comparison as they could do, and they had a good film lab, a Photochem, doing the processing and transfers. So I don't think they were making it look bad by any means. And they had very fast lenses. They used exactly the same Zeiss lenses on all the cameras. So you're shooting through the same lenses. The camera doesn't make a difference, and of course the 35 millimeter, because it's all about the lens and the film. So they're at the same f-stop, et cetera, pretty much wide open.
And this was done under the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, and at the ASC, the American Society of Cinematographers, did they provide the actual DPs and the things like that? So was this kind of working at the most technically sophisticated level of the industry? Would you consider that correct?
Yes, they all had good DPs that were handling it. I think James Mathers and who was the Beaver's brother. Jerry Mathers. He's been a DP in done video as a video cameraman and editorial and DP work for 40 years. So he's very highly qualified. And he hosted the event. So they did have qualified people that were obviously handling all this. And that, like I say, they spent a boatload of money creating all the sets and shooting in multiple countries, et cetera, to achieve these comparisons. And the post-production was really well done too. They would do these to show the elasticity. They would do these wipes that would go around the circle of these 4 rooms that were built on stage, and they would go with 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stop, 4 stop, and this clock type wipe where you could see the different stops compared to each other as the wipe comes around. So it was really very interesting, and they did they did a great job on producing it. If you look at the trailer, if you look online for the HBO annual camera test, and they do this every year. I think they took a year off for COVID, but they do this comparison test to figure out which cameras are the best for them to produce on every year, and so it gets kind of expensive. But they do it right, and they spend all the money to do it correctly.
Nice. Let's go to the next question.
From Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. He says, what is the workflow for obtaining high-quality audio from film footage archive.org?
Ronnie Hossoy.
Well, I don't have an answer to this, but we're looking for similar technologies to have, for instance, this broadcast on YouTube split up to each question, put that into an audio transcriptor service like Whisper, and then get a transcription back, and then start to modify that. We have looked into several options and are still looking for an optimal workflow for these types of issues or things to do.
Doesn't old film just have a mag stripe down the side? So that could have degraded over the course of time. Courtney, you know about this.
It varies. On another SMPTE meeting, SMPTE meetings are great to go to if you have some in your area. Attend. That talked about taking several older films like Lawrence of Arabia and converting them to dimensional sound, where they take the original soundtracks that they have available for them. And it depends on the film. Some of them, the only surviving soundtracks are the actual 6-track magnetic stripe films that were projected. And sometimes they can go back to the stems where they have music and effects, music, dialogue, and effects, those 3 stems, and they can mix from those. But usually those are a lot of times mono, and sometimes they're optical. So they have to have special optical pickups that they transfer the optical soundtrack in, and then they have to run it through depoppers and denoisers that remove any of the optical, scratches and things that would cause pops and clicks and variable bows and flutters from that 35 millimeter optical soundtrack, and then they bring it into audio workstation where they do the cleanups on it. And you got to remember back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, up until the time of magnetic and digital sound, there was the Academy filter, which limited you till about 8,000 K on the high end, and above about 200 hertz on the low end. So the dialogue is very clear in all those movies, but you didn't have a lot of fidelity for orchestral pieces and so on until they got to using multi-track optical and then multi-track magnetic. Fantasia was the first one that did multi-track optical, 6-track optical in the release that ran on a separate dubber, a separate sound playback film transport that was played back in sync with the 35 millimeter film that was in the projector, so that they could have 6 tracks of playback, because back then that was the only way they could fit 6 tracks onto a piece of film. It was 2 separate pieces of film. So that there's a lot of audio restoration that goes on, and on SMPTE you might find some information there on their website about restored films there.
Let's go to one more question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman from Brevard says, how many MEs is enough MEs for a large show like an NFL game? How many MEs or mix effects buses do you need those big raw switchers, or how many MEs do those big raw switchers have?
Alex.
Most switchers are generally limited to 4. You usually see 4, but there can be up to 8 that I've seen on some of the switchers. Those are Grass Valley switchers, I believe. And so, but a lot of the ones that we see in trucks are typically, I think, about 4 is what we normally see. And so I think 4 is what they get. I think you talk to any TD, and we had Brad on last week, there's not enough MEs. I mean, they would fill as many MEs as someone gave them on a switcher, because what they do is they just build other programs on them. So it's just a cost and complexity division. But if you ask the TD, I think they would ask for 16, or 32, because they just keep on building. They would just build more complex shows, because those are places where they can build a different setup and a different look and so on and so forth, and keep moving forward.
So we've got one more question. I think we'll sneak it in here before we transition to our second hour topic. So, Courtney?
All right. Gordon Lake from Los Angeles, California says, what production knowledge do you have that is no longer useful?
Try not to take 4 hours on this, Alex, because we've all forgotten so much.
I would say almost none of it. Almost all of it's still useful. I mean, the thing is that as we were talking about earlier, the corpus of our experience allows us to problem solve things that come up, and they're weird. There's weird things. There are things that I learned on a farm that are useful in production, and I learned those 40 years ago. So I don't know of any of the knowledge that I have that I would consider not useful at this point, except for the stuff I forgot because I haven't used it for so long.
Yeah, there may be a couple of technical things that nobody's ever using, like I actually know how to operate a wire recorder. I'm not sure if that is all that relevant to today, but Ronnie?
But it's the experience. It's the experience that you apply to other things.
I can edit by tying a knot in a wire. Ronnie Hofsar.
Well, there's only one thing I can come up with, and that's token ring network topology. That is something I actively have forgotten.
Good. Okay, Courtney.
Well, I haven't quite forgotten it yet, but as I've been in the business 50 years, I've seen a lot of things come and go. And in my field of work, audio and video playback, 24-frame video playback, has changed considerably because we've gone from recording on analog recorders. So, doing the azimuth alignment on the heads and adjusting the bias voltages on the heads, that's history. Can't even find tape anymore. So there's one thing. Then we move to DAT, which of course is another dead format. And the problem with DAT was in transferring it. We had to do, when shooting 24-frame film and recording sound on a DAT recorder, you had to use time code for synchronization, and the time code in America was at SMPTE rates, and the film was running at an integer rate. The time code was running at a non-integer rate, so we had to do funny things about pull up and pull down of the time code rate to get the time code numbers to sync up right. Thankfully, most of that is history now, since we are recording on digital files at 5994 instead of 24 or 30, which is what we used to have to record with time code at 30 and then pull it down to 2997. It got incredibly complex. And thankfully, I can erase all of those gyrations from my brain. I actually wrote software to deal with that a lot of post-production houses dealt with, and I don't get calls from them in the middle of the night anymore. That's great.
Yeah. I don't think I've wired an RS-232 connection in a long time. So some stuff does fade away. All right. That moves us into time for our second hour. And today, it's Monday. We're talking about kind of business things, and we're talking about business relationships here. And anybody who's been in the business a long time and know it's always been one of the most important aspects of developing and maintaining your career. Learning how to keep your relationships strong. When you are lucky enough to get your first clients, you learn really quick how hard it is to add a client as opposed to making your existing client happy. So most of us work really diligently to maintain these kind of relationships. It is really critical. And particularly, I think, now that your competition is really the world. Back when I was starting out, you had a local pod of people who did the same kind of work that you did. And there was only so many resources that a client who had some money to spend on production could go to. Well, now in the digital world, particularly all this distributed processing we do, your clients theoretically, your competition theoretically could be coming from anywhere on the planet. So it is a more difficult, I believe, competitive environment than it's ever been before. So we're going to spend the next hour talking about how to manage business relationships for success. I'm going to let Alex start off and do the next segment of this. What's your experience been like? Alex?
Sorry, having a little audio issue there. I think that one of the things that's really important is we don't a lot of times I went with Pixel Core. I didn't view what we did. We didn't have any sales staff. We didn't try to sell people on anything. We didn't do any advertising. We didn't even have a website. Most of the time that Pixel Core did production, it didn't even have a website that said we do production. What we focused really on is exactly this, which is that when you handed us something, what we were going to do is give you a level of confidence that it was going to get done. And also, one of the things that that always sticks with me in the Ritz, when you walk into the Ritz, I've never really stayed at the Ritz, but I've worked in the Ritz. And when you go through the loading dock, there's this sign that everyone sees that says, "Ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen." And that's the way you want to treat your clients, and that's the way you want to be when talking to your clients. Is you bring this certain class to how you talk and how you work with your clients, and it tends to be that tended to be something we focused on very heavily in our emails, in our interactions, in our a lot of it was low key but very professional. I think that the folks that we saw weren't as successful oftentimes were folks who were a little too candid. they joke a little too much with the clients. They'd hang out and they'd think that they're building a relationship, but wow, is that dangerous? Like you might get a certain kind of client that wants to do that, but if you want to keep moving up and because I will say, if you're moving up into larger and larger clients, it really made a difference to be, to really keep it tight. And a lot of times that's what we talked about was keep it tight, in that process. So we really focused on how we interacted. Minimum number of words for things that we needed to say, building out things that really provided that. The other thing we did is we didn't tell the client that everything's going great, because if things went wrong, then they didn't have any confidence in us anymore. They didn't believe it. But we also didn't tell them everything was going horribly either, even if we might have had some challenges at that moment. We did communicate it when we needed to, but until then we were like, well, everything's nominal, or, oh, we're working on these things. And we tended to live in a very low key, nothing is excitable. And the reason that we stayed low key on almost everything was because when I needed to, when we were in trouble and we needed the client to do something, we would step it up and say, hey, this is something that's important. And they almost never saw that. So we were like, hey, this is important and we need to handle it right now, or we're worried about something. By not saying we're worried about something all the time and not being excitable all the time, and keeping this kind of low key, drawn out process, we tuned the client to a position where they understood that if we say something's a problem, it's really a problem. And so I think a lot of people tend to go too far in that area. And a lot of people want to tell their clients, they always want to tell their clients that everything's going great. That's fine, as long as you really know that everything's going to go great all the way through the thing. And most of us never know that, that it's always going to go perfectly. And so staying in that low key. Then the other thing is that we really spent a lot of time triangulating our clients. And so looking at what they like, what they don't like, what they want to do. We're trying to think about ahead of time, like this is how they think. This is what they want. And all the way down to, we had a client that their logo was blue and white. And what we did is when you walked into our space that we had behind the stage for them and the places that they sat, the power supplies were white and all of their little iPhone charging cables were all blue. And, it was down to those kinds of things all the time. We knew what kind of coffee they wanted. We knew what kind of, I don't do as much physical production anymore, so I don't think about it as much. But when we were interacting with them, we really paid attention to every little thing that they would be happy with. I knew that I had one client that would lose their iPhone cable all the time. their iPhone. They just never had it. And they'd always say, "Hey, do you have another iPhone cable?" I had a whole bag of iPhone cables. I just handle it. They'd say, "Oh, I'll get it back to you." I'm like, "Oh no, just keep it. It's fine." And they didn't realize that was part of that. But that's, to me, that kind of service is far more useful than all the ads in the world. Is how someone feeling like, and we look at how every single show is going to be better than the next show. You know, a lot of times what a lot of production companies, oftentimes that we end up taking their work, is they're focused on how to squeeze the most margin out of things. I'm always figuring out how to have it be a good business, but also how to just keep on ratcheting up the quality, keep on ratcheting up the customization, keep on ratcheting up and trying to find new ways to make it better, because it makes it harder and harder. If the client decides to use somebody else, it becomes almost impossible for them. Someone else gets in there and it's unworkable, because we have figured out all this customization beyond just the doing the show. There's all these other things that we've built around it that really encase that show and make it much higher experience, better experience for the client, and just a lot easier to process there. So,
Courtney, your thoughts?
I was going to elaborate a little bit on kind of what Alex was touching on. And I worked for many years in the commercial business, producing television commercials, or working on television commercials, but working with television commercial producers for high-end, network television commercials. And I'll tell you, nothing is unheard of for providing for the client, the agency area. They would bring in really comfortable designer leather couches and arrange them in a U shape. They would have lots of places to plug in their iPhone chargers, or even provide phones before there were iPhones, before there were cell phones for the agency to be on and talk on. And of course, a large screen monitor for them to look at the video assist on as we were shooting the commercial. They would even light them. They'd have the gaffer come in and light the client area with, they'd have practical lamps on end tables at the ends of the couch so that they could read or do whatever they look at their scripts, do whatever they need to with available light, but not keep it too bright. And block off. They put 40 by black cloth up to block the light coming from the set from shining in their eyes. So they went to every expense. And then, of course, craft service is another amazing thing. They would have, a top chef come out and cook little hors d'oeuvres that they would bring around every 20 minutes or so on a tray to all the clients and the agency people in that area. The other thing is they would actually have to build two areas like that, because a lot of times the production company would want to keep the clients separated from the agency, because they don't want interference between those two. They don't want the clients making a lot of suggestions to the agency who's come with their storyboards all intact, and they like to keep that down. The other thing is they have to deal with parents. If you're dealing with children, they have another little area that has to be set up with separate video assist for the parents of the children that are on camera, so they can see, and they're not near the clients, so that they don't hear what the clients are saying about their kids, et cetera, or the actors. So you really have to walk on eggshells to preserve that business relationship between the clients, the agency, and the actors and their significant others or parents. So it's a delicate balance, and they spend huge amounts of money on just maintaining that, simply for the fact of retaining that relationship. And I worked on a lot of clients, a lot of production companies would have the same relationship with that particular client for years and years, even though every job comes up in the advertising business. They have to put it out for bids, and they'll put it out for bids for different production companies. But each client would have their favorite director. So a lot of times they would always bid on that director and make sure that director won the bid, as long as they were happy. And keeping them happy was a major business consideration.
Alex, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, and I think that all of the things that we're talking about on set, but there's also things about how you relate to your clients. Like, one of the things that I think I didn't do very well for a long time was I hated video meetings. I know that sounds crazy because we're in a video meeting right now, but I hated being tied down to my office, and so I didn't really didn't. It was kind of this passive aggressive. And what I was doing at the time was video events, right? Video meeting events using Hangouts and so on and so forth. But I would always say, hey, I'm having trouble or whatever, and I'm just going to call in. So I'd call in for all these things so I could walk around and I didn't have to be, inside of this process. That was a huge mistake, because I think that, if you're meeting with clients, you should be a place where you can have the meeting and you should look good and sound good. That is, especially if you do what we do, if we're doing production, you need to look good and sound good. Don't call in. Don't call in. I will almost never call in. My schedule is, unless I'm traveling, unless I'm on the road, my schedule of when I'm in my studio, home studio or not, is wrapped around all those meetings. I am on that meeting. I am in the camera that you see right now. I look the way I look. I sound the way I sound. And it changes the way you interact with your clients to be in that area. You don't, a lot of people think that's not important, but I'm telling you that it makes a difference in what's going on there. And so you definitely want to focus on how you interact at every single meeting, and how you, and whether you're ready for that meeting. And when you're, and the other thing that I don't do is I don't do anything other than the meeting. If I'm going to be in the meeting, I'm in the meeting. I'm not checking my email. I'm not ordering things. I'm not checking other things. I'm not watching anything else. I'm just present, in the meeting. And 80% of the folks in the meeting are not, which means the meeting goes leans towards me and the client because I'm present. I'm just listening. I'm just sitting there in the conversation, listening and having that, and knowing I can just watch everybody on the call and watch everybody else that's looking down. They're going through emails and texts and all kinds of other things, and they're not fully present. And you just can't have a meeting where you're not fully present, in my opinion. And most of the time when I'm working with clients, I usually have a producer. If we're going to talk about a project, I usually have a producer in the call with me. They're writing everything down. I don't even try to write it down. I just want to be there. I want to be in that call and not write anything down, so that I can just really engage with the client and figure out what they actually need and want, without having to sit there and constantly stop and type. Now, there are meetings that I do that with, but I try to avoid it when I can. So those are things that are really important as you kind of go down that path. The other thing is your emails. I get really touchy. People who worked around me, the emails, have to be very professional and soft. Like, hey, there's a lot of ways to say the same thing, and you want to think about how to say them in a nice way. How to, even if the client is behind on something or whatever, how do you coax that out of them without making them wrong, without the feeling? Because you don't want clients to have it like, oh, when I talk to Alex, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble with my vendor, because they're upset about something or they're pushing at me at something, and you don't want them apologizing to you. You want them to be excited. I always look at how, and I don't always do this well. Like sometimes I can, but what I'm always striving for is to get to a point where they're excited to talk, about something. They're excited to be part of that conversation, with me, and not that that this is going to be a hard conversation, to have, you don't want your clients to relate to it that way. So really think about how you approach that. The final thing I'll say before we get into questions is be really careful about billing. I think that a lot of people, they think a lot about what they need as opposed to what the client's going through to get them paid. And people who are hard, they think that it's a great thing to sit there and email someone a relatively terse email at 31 days when it was a 30-day, term or whatever. And there's a lot of clients that always, it's not, you're oftentimes a freelancer, even if you're a company, you're a vendor, they can pick another vendor. And being harsh about how you get paid doesn't eliminate you. It's not like, oh, I'll never work with that person again, but it puts you further down the ring. Like everything, you have to remember that everything that you do with the client, how you handle your emails, how you're in the meetings, how you do billing, how you do all these other things, it's not one of them. Well, sometimes it's one of them, but generally not one of them that causes the issue. It is usually a compendium. And sometimes you're so good at what you do, they'll put up with it. But, I think we have a lot of people that have somebody else for them. It's sometimes their wife, it's sometimes a partner and they've decided that's the person that's going to be the hard person that's going to go, ask for money and be rough about it and terse about it. And if they're really good, people will put up with that. But if you're not really good, people will be like, it's like a lot of work. It's a lot of work to hire that person. So because someone's going to call me and they're going to harangue me about something. And so you just want to be careful about how you go down that path, because again, in our business, everybody has a choice every single time. They can come back to you or not come back to you, and they might start experimenting with other people because you're difficult. And I have definitely been both the person who took the work because someone else was difficult, and the person that lost the work because I was difficult. So I, as I can tell you that I would recommend being careful with how you interact with your clients that way.
Absolutely great advice so far. I was rereading the question on how to create and enhance business relationships outside of traditional advertising in just a moment. Advertising is one of the things that can get people to know you if they don't know you, or at least, but that is not the relationship. That is the looking for new people to form a relationship with. So I've seen a lot of people fail who think if they just do constant marketing and constant advertising and they don't pay attention to the churn of the fact that they are losing clients and replacing them with new ones all the time, that is a horribly inefficient process, because you spend so much of your time trying to keep up with a constantly roiling pool of clients that you never really get to know them, where you can do this process. And what I've heard over and over again from everybody who's talked about this in this session and in my career is that confidence in you is about 50% of the battle. At some point, they're coming to you as a new potential relationship person with your services, and they have to have confidence in you at some point, or they won't give you to the people above them, and they're all constantly saying, well, maybe somebody else is better. If you can establish that confidence for them and you, and for you and them, that it's going to be a good relationship on both sides, that goes a long way. And one more thing, which is very intangible, but I discovered the importance of likability. Alex is exactly right. They have many options out there. A lot of people do this kind of work, and some sort of a process that you go through with bonding with your clients so that they enjoy the time you spend with them goes a long way. I've had CEOs actually tell me, we have to put this out for a competitive bid, and then I'd find out a month later, yeah, I just didn't fit with them. And you're trying to figure out what it was that the other person missed, but you're glad that what they wanted to come back to you for was to rekindle that relationship, because you had made it easy and positive, and you watched out for the things that could snap them and cause projects to go down the tubes. But you did it all in an environment where they felt like you were part of the team and they were glad you were on the team. If you can reach that, boy, you're really getting something done. Alex, another thought?
I just remember, as someone who's not used advertising almost at all ever, 99% of all the work I've ever gotten is because someone recommended me. Like that someone said, this is the person that you want to use for that. And again, that comes, and one of the things I will say is that it's not just about succeeding at the event. It's how you succeeded. It's how you, how you approach that, and so the client feeling like it was a smooth landing, into a live, especially live events, which is what I mostly work on. The client feeling like it's a smooth landing and not a bunch of emergencies all the way in. At first, it's just a matter of just getting it done from the beginning to the end, but then feeling like it was all under control and it was all managed. And life really is a confidence game, and people feeling confident that you can get it done and feeling confident throughout the entire event. And it's not always going to happen. Things happen and you're trying to do that. But what you want to do is create that smooth experience for your clients so that they don't feel like it was this melee to get your event done or your production done. They feel like it was smooth. Or smooth-ish, or smoother than anyone else that they've worked with. And so those are the things you want to kind of keep in mind.
Courtney, you had a follow-up thought?
Yeah, Alex brought up an important point, is if you're a freelance person, like a camera operator, a sound mixer, or editor, and you want to get work from a variety of different production companies, referrals is one of the best ways to get that job. Advertising usually isn't going to get it for you. Putting out your reel might get it for you, but I don't know a lot of people that are looking at Soundman's reels. Never even had a reel for working as a sound mixer. But the way you'd get jobs is make friends with other sound mixers who trust your opinion and, operate similarly to the way that they do. And then when they get booked on, double booked, in other words, they're booked on a job and they get an offer for another job they can't do, they will refer that job to you. and you have to have enough trust in them to make sure they want to make sure you're not going to steal their good client. So you'll do that job, but then you'll get exposure to those production managers that are on that job for that particular client. And maybe in the future, that production manager will keep you in mind when their number one person on their list is not available. You might be slotted in at number two. So you got to make friends with the production coordinators and producers who are the people who do the hiring a lot of times on those jobs. So getting referrals is the best way to get a job in the industry that I've seen.
Alex, followed?
Yeah, to build on what Courtney was talking about, the people around you are very important that you're working with, and understanding where you are in the food chain and how everybody's connected is a really important piece of the puzzle. And one of the things that you do have to be careful about, one of the things that Courtney mentioned that is super important is if someone brings me into a show, I will never take that client. I've had clients come after me. I had someone who didn't know the business very well, so they brought us in to do the job. The client got very clear that they were just someone who brought us in to solve the problem. And so, of course, the client came to us. And now I'd never worked with that client before, didn't know about them. This agency, small agency, had brought us in, and I flat out was like, nope, I can't go in there. And I probably gave up a lot of work, but that is the line not to cross in this industry, because if people don't feel safe around you, if they feel like, and if they hear you trying to sell yourself to their client, if they hear you, talking a lot about that kind of stuff, they won't feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, they'll never recommend you. In fact, they'll oftentimes push back on when people say, hey, we're looking for these people. And they're like, oh, don't get that guy. Don't get that guy. And so you want to be very careful of playing, understanding that model and understanding that you can't cross certain lines and expect that the industry is very small and it'll get around really fast. And then also throwing people under the bus. It's a really dangerous thing to do because, they're going to remember that. So you have to, that definitely pointing things out and moving things forward. And there are times when you have to fight for having a better production, but you have to be very careful of what you do there.
Let me just add one tiny little thing before we get into our main questions, which is this. It freaked me out to realize it early in my career, but you're always being watched. You're being watched by everybody, and even the people you don't think are watching you, like the rental house where you go to pick up things. And I'll never forget the time that the rental house said, you've been coming in and you've been doing bigger and bigger things. You've been renting more and more gear like that. And so I'm going to start recommending you to some of the people. Ask me who can do this kind of work. And I had no clue that a vendor was judging me the same way I would judge somebody coming in to work for me. Literally, the industry is always looking for who are the up-and-coming players, who's being diligent, who's showing up on time. They want these people. I mean, this is who they're trying to use to build their peripheral staff and to recommend to their people. So if you can get into that mindset, this doesn't mean you cannot have a flaw and you can't, I don't want you to think that you have to be perfect. It's not that. When you're young, you will make some mistakes, but people are also judging how you handle it when you do. Are you apologetic but not a sycophant about it? Can you pick yourself up and now do it right the next 5 times they call you to do it? Those things make an impression on the people that you're doing this work for. And so literally everything you're doing is making an impression as you go out there. So just understand that in the back of your mind. You can build a positive reputation as easily as you can build a negative one if you just mind your P's and Q's and go out with that in mind. All right, let's get into our first question.
First question comes in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. He says, what sort of research into your prospective clients do panelists usually do when looking to turn them into a customer of your services?
To start us off, Courtney.
Well, I do, if I can, if information is available on that client, I'll ask some other people if they've ever worked for them. You have to be careful there because if they consider that person a client that you're asking about, they're going to get nervous that, you're looking to steal their client. So you got to be careful about that. Look up as much information as you can on the background of the company. If they have a website, if they have a legitimate address, that kind of stuff. If you've never heard of them before, do some background checking. Check if there's any Better Business Bureau complaints about them. Check to see if they, like I say, if they have a website and they're a going concern, and you can look a lot of times if it's a production company or a client, You can look and see what other stuff that they've done. They'll usually have a reel posted on their website. So you can see if they've done a lot of high profile stuff. They're probably not stiffing the people that are working for them. And a lot of times, if I just get a client call me and ask me for a prompting job or something, I've never heard of them before, and it's a single production, I'll ask for a pay on the day of the shoot. And then after that, I will work for them again and give them 30 days to pay their invoices after I work with them once and establish a relationship with them. So, I'm fairly cautious about that, and I've only been stiffed about 3 or 4 times in about 30 years. So I consider that a pretty good average. And a lot of times you got to worry about production. A lot of production these days is independently produced. So the production company or the entity that is hiring you and paying you only exists while that production is going on. And when the production ends, the company is dissolved and goes away, and getting paid can be quite difficult if the entity that has the money or had the money never exists anymore. So you got to make sure that you get paid in a timely way and that they don't dissolve the company before your paycheck goes out. So those are some considerations in how to turn a client into a customer. Like I say, I just do a lot of research. And if somebody comes to me with a horror story about not getting paid, I mark that down and keep track of that client or that production manager or that producer. To if I find out that they've stiffed several clients in the past, I just tell them when they call, I say, I'm sorry, I'm booked those days. Sorry, I can't work with you.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that I definitely look at what they want to do. I try to get that. I will say that I like to do a lot of things with email, but if there's someone new coming in, I really want to get on a call with them as fast as I can. Like, just let's talk about what you want to do. I get a really good feel for people when I'm on that video call going back and forth. What are you trying to do? And what are you looking at? And how you, and I want to get into that conversation as fast as I can, because a lot of times you have a client coming, they're hiring you because they don't know how they're going to do that, or they haven't done that before. And you want to start talking to them about what that actually looks like and figure out what's possible. So a lot of times they think that things aren't possible that are easy, and they also think they think things are possible that are hard, and expensive. And you want to kind of error correct that the fastest way possible, and make sure that it's comfortable. Another thing that's kind of tangential to that is I make sure I talk to my clients all the time saying, you can just call me anytime. I don't care whether it turns into a job or not. If you just want some input on how this works, call me and we'll talk about it. And the reason I do that is A, I'm there and I understand what they're doing. I'm able to triangulate better what they're trying to get done. But B, I don't want them to wait and do 6 months of planning and then bring me in the last 2 months to execute an event that could have been much better if we had talked 6 months ago. And so, you want to make sure that I'm not worried about, especially if they've already been a client that's hired me. I'm not worried about the hourly consulting or whatever. I mean, obviously, some clients will pay me ongoingly because I'm in meetings all the time and I'm working through all that stuff. But for individuals that want a half an hour here or there, I usually try to make myself as available as possible, because you never know where that's going to go.
And I will say, in answer to this question, it's never been easier, because almost every company, almost every person has some sort of an online thing that you could research and find out a little bit about who this person is, whether their business has a good reputation or not. And it's the people who, you try to follow up on and you have trouble finding them on the web and things like that. I'm much more worried about those than someone who looks like they've been on for 5 or 10 years and has a history of posting in boards and things like that, particularly if it's in their area of expertise. You kind of have a lot more feeling of safety. Kind of hard to hide these days. Let's go on to the next question.
Next one comes in from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles. He says, when a competitor is aggressively courting your client, how do you respond if your relationship with the client has been professional but passive? Alex, help us out.
To turn that around, I will say that I don't tend to respond to hard sales very, very well. I think that for me, working on the projects effectively, those are the people that I hire. People calling me all the time or telling me that they're available or whatever usually doesn't mean a lot to me. Letting me know. So the way that I stay in contact with clients, and I have to admit, I would love to say this is a systematized thing, but it's not. I consider my clients my friends. And if I don't consider them my friends, I don't work for them very long. I just, I don't work for people I don't like. But because of that, I get excited about something and I'll just send them, hey, check this out. Hey, check this out. I'm not asking them for work, and I'm not even I have to admit, I would love to say that's a plan, but it's mostly that I think they'd be interested in that, and I send it to them. But that's as close to, they're part of my little group of people because I work with them, and I send them things that I think are interesting. But that's how I stay in contact with them. I don't say, hey, by the way, I'm working, or it was really great to work on this big project, and I just want to show you what we did. I don't do any of that stuff.
Ronnie.
Well, second what Alex said, and we tend to sometimes have clients that forget that we are there, and always I have a feeling of they forget what we actually do. So if we have a case where a client is sending the signals that they are about to change their operations or do stuff the other way, we tend to remind them of everything we do behind the scenes that they are not aware of. For instance, in the agency where we have web pages, we tend to send them a list of all the things that we actually take care of that they don't necessarily know of, and that our competitors definitely doesn't know that they have to do to compete. So that's just a reminder of everything we do, and they tend to come back.
Courtney?
Yeah, I guess we could put this under discussion of pricing. When you get into competition with someone and the client knows that, smells blood in the water, and they will start playing you against the competition, and it quickly becomes a pricing race to the bottom. And you want to be very careful about this. You want to not try and undercut the other guy too much, because once you lowball a bid, that producer is going to expect you for that lowball bid every time he hires you. And so then you're going to get yourself into another strata of lower priced productions. And once you're in that strata, that leads to a lower strata, and lower strata, you work your way down rather than up. So the point is to kind of price yourself competitively with the people that are above you in the strata above you, and a lot of times it'll allow you to move up rather than down. So it's kind of a stratified area of competition that you're competing in, and if you price yourself too low, a lot of times production companies won't consider you because they think, oh, well, he's in that lower tier, we don't want to use that person, even though you may have the qualifications of somebody in a tier above what they're bidding on. So you got to be careful about pricing yourself, underpricing yourself, or overpricing yourself. And a lot of times, if you find that the client is one of those people that doesn't care about quality or the job that you're doing for them and is only paying attention to that budget item that line item on their budget, let that client go, because they'll always be coming to you and nickel and diming you. And can you give us 5 days? Can you give us a 3-day deal on the equipment instead of 5? Or can you give us a 2-day deal on the equipment instead of 5? Give it to us for 5, but only charge us for 2. Or a lot of times they would even ask us to, this is the reason I'm in the union, they would ask us to, work 12 hours for a 8-hour day, and just don't put it on your time card. So people that ask for that, bye-bye.
I will also note that you should probably try to evolve as you go up the corporate ladder with your clients. I'll never forget a day that I got to work with the CEO about the third or fourth time, and I had noticed in the Wall Street Journal that their stock had hit a new thing. So I just said, hey, 104.70 today. Congratulations, Bob. I got a big smile, and that just me understanding that he was thinking in those terms, and that he suddenly understood that I was paying attention to their overall, what was important to him, just increases your connection just a little bit. So as you move up, realize who you're going to be dealing with and pay attention to what's important to them. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Ontario, Canada. It says, what is the most effective way to maintain a relationship with a supplier or service?
Ronnie Hosso is going to start us out. Ronnie?
Well, we tend to have repeated conversations or status meetings. Some clients, we have it weekly. Other, we have it bi-monthly or even every 6 months. But keeping up the contact and knowing what is changing within the company or at the client is really important. Maybe they change leadership. There are new persons coming in, old friends in the company is leaving. So keeping kind of in contact with them is a really good advice that we have earned a lot of.
Courtney?
Yeah, and as far as maintaining a relationship with supplier or service, so where you're getting that service or supply from an individual, pay your bills on time is one thing, but establish a one-to-one relationship. Find an anchor person at that supplier or that service or that production company, et cetera, that you deal with all the time. And always ask to talk to that person. And once you establish a personal relationship with the company, it's a lot easier to bug them about a past due bill, or if they owe you money, or let you get away with, oh, can you give me 3 more days? We're behind on accounting to pay your bills. So once you establish a personal relationship with somebody at that company, we'll cut you a lot of slack in maintaining a relationship and ability to keep that person as a client for a longer period of time.
Amen to that. Let's go to the next question.
From Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina. He says, what was the worst choice you have made in your career in regards to business relationship? Oh, boy.
Alex.
I think that the 2 things that I've done that haven't worked out very well. Number one was that, I've had clients that, you get to a point where you're not sure if they're ever really going to turn the corner. Like they're never going to, it's oftentimes when I'm working, it's more than money to me. It's like trying to produce a great product. And I think I've had some clients that I've decided that they're not, they're never going to get there. And then I get a little edgy, and just kind of like, I try to push it. I either am trying to push it forward. I'm trying to, I heard you there, Courtney, trying to push it forward, or I just kind of just am a little dismissive of stuff. And I've gotten much better at not doing that, because a lot of times they can turn the corner and they will do it. And they're working with a whole bunch of internal politics, and there's a whole bunch of pieces of that puzzle. The other thing that I've done is I've handed it off to somebody, and then just, in my company, I've handed it off to people and said, well, you just handle that, because I'm not interested in that anymore. And I move it on and they take it over. And then what I've had happen a couple times is they end up just going into that company and taking the work, or going into another company and taking the work. And so making sure that the client is still interacting with the primary person in the company, I think is something that is important, and making sure that you're paying attention to that they're getting served and getting taken care of at every moment. And even if things you don't agree with the things that are going there, at some point it is a business, and you have to make sure that they're getting everything they paid for, and more, that's how you build up a good business. And you're not as, but again, it's hard because a lot of us are creatives, and you get to a point where not all the work that you get is creative, or it's too creative. And, the other thing you get tired of sometimes is that people are zigzagging all over the place and making a bunch of decisions. And that's just part of being in a corporate environment. If you're doing corporate work, and in Hollywood, it's chaos. So you just have to be used to the chaos that occurs, that's related to that.
Courtney.
Be careful of partnerships, especially if you're bringing something unique to the business that the other partners really can't do, and the business is based on that talent or that information or that product that you're bringing. Be careful about I've been in a couple of businesses with 3 partners, and if you're the one that's supplying 90% of what the intellectual property that the business is marketing, you have to be very careful, because the 2 partners can gang up on you and take the business away from you, and then you're stuck paying the bills, and they're getting all the income. So be very careful about business relationships in that way. And that's why I have basically severed all of my business partnerships, and I own all of the stock in my corporations now, because you never know, when business is good, they will, everybody wants a bigger piece of the pie when business is good, and there's a lot of competition when that happens, and things which were originally amicable, and each person had their own responsibilities when that business was formed, you'll find that some people turn out to be deadbeats and some don't. And it's not easy to sever your relationship without destroying the company. So just be careful in partnerships or corporations or limited liability corporations. Partners are always problems, I always say.
Yeah, I only have one thing that really stuck in my mind from my years of doing business, and it was a political and or relationship thing. They brought in a new consultant, and I was working kind of directly on a project under her, and it turned out to be a dishonest person. I mean, literally, we were responsible for some things. She was responsible for some things. We got all stuff done. She hadn't done any of hers and tried to throw us under the bus as the party that didn't get things done. And the reason I'm saying it's a political thing, because I sat for a moment, I thought, do I bring this to the next level up? I know some people there. Should I break the kind of chain of command? And it was only when we started hearing things about that we might have been dishonest in a thing, I thought that's crossing the line. So I had to go to a senior vice president and say, we've been working for you for a long time, and I just have to tell you my side of this. I'm not sure I cured anything. And that toxic moment relationship thing, what it caused me to do is to say, don't always assume that everybody in an organization is either neutral or working in your best interest. Sometimes you will come across somebody who's actively trying to tear you down. And I wish I had been more politically sensitive to that going into that. I probably could have built better safety valves by just not assuming that everyone was on the up and up in that. That was a hard lesson. Ronnie, you had a thought?
Yeah, I totally agree on that. We've all been hiring people that are not what they are seemingly being. Not necessarily hostile, but trying to undermine what you're doing, and eventually you have to let them go. And if you have to let people go and are sitting with a good feeling, you should be a little bit more alert before you hire them. So, and as well as keeping everything in written agreements should be written, not just talked about in a meeting. And suddenly you have these gentleman agreements with are leaving the company or are put into other workplaces or do other stuff, and then you have to deal with this. Agreements with other peoples that didn't necessarily know of the details. So be very, very detailed about what you are doing with these companies.
Absolutely. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question comes from Dave Troutman in Edmonton. It says, what would be the most common way a relationship can be damaged?
Alex?
Failure. Like just know that failure of your event or the production is going to be that is the easiest way to damage your relationship. In most cases, you get to fail once. You get to fail once, and that's it. Like they're going to go on to somebody else, or they're going to definitely be looking. You can kind of get away with it sometimes if you really build a great relationship with someone and it's not all your fault. But even what we found is that even when it's somebody else's fault, oftentimes we've lost the client. So that's why I have a tendency to take a holistic view of things and make sure that everybody's successful and everybody's doing well. And I stay in my lane, but I do pay attention to everything else around me to make sure that we've had ones where we've even told the client over in every meeting for weeks that if we go down this path, it's going to fail because of what these guys are doing. And then when it fails, we still lost the job because they decided they didn't want to do that anymore. It's not that they didn't fire us. They just decided that this kind of business is, live is very dangerous and so on and so forth. That was the post company that did something that we told them that, hey, that's not going to work. And so I think that failure is the number one way to damage a relationship. The second worst is harsh words, just harsh words with folks. There's really decide whether the words that you're about to say verbally over email, text is really going to make any difference. And if it's not going to make any difference, there's no reason to say it. Like you just, doesn't help you to do that. And so you can always tell people who understand corporate really well is because you can see something going on in their head and they'll just they just kind of nod. They don't have any, they've decided that there's nothing the words that were going to come out of their mouth are not going to move the conversation forward, and therefore they're inefficient. And people who get good at this oftentimes get pretty good at being that way. And people who don't have a harder time getting the next gig. So,
Courtney?
Well, after a failure to pay, I'd say, or get paid, probably poaching is a great way to damage a relationship. It's a very competitive world out there. And if you are brought in as an independent contractor for one specific task, like a cinematographer or a sound mixer, and you have your own production company, never pitch yourself, as Alex pointed out earlier, to the client, because once the person who brought you in sees you trying to promote yourself to replace them, you'll never work with that person again, and you'll develop a bad reputation for poaching, and that can end your career.
Next question. Oops, Courtney, you're muted.
It's Lalik Lopez Waterman in Broward, North Carolina, says, what was the best choice you have made in your career in regards to business relationship?
Alex.
A business partner of mine had a little bit of a trouble at work and ended up, being let go. And I knew that they were great in what they did. And I, did a lot of work to kind of help them get through that moment. And when they ended up where they ended up next, they brought in an enormous, just a stunning amount of work in my direction, helped me do a lot of other things, helped a lot of other bits and pieces. And I'll tell you that my relationships with people who are partners is I relate to that person, not to the company that they're at. And so when they move on, I stay connected to them, and I'm not looking for something. I'm just looking to I identify good people. And I identify them as people that I want to have on my productions, people that I want to know in the future. And I oftentimes will maintain those relationships for a long time, regardless of where they are. And most people won't do that. As soon as you're not working for the big company they're working for, they kind of forget that you're there. And all of that has been some of the best things that have happened, because they end up somewhere and they realize that your relationship with them is not dependent on their position. It's dependent on who they are. And that's the kind of people that most people want to work with.
Courtney?
Best choices I find is buying out deadbeat partners. Try and do it on a,
obviously Courtney's had a lot of business issues. This was coming out here. We're sussing this out. Yeah.
And that's the other thing I was going to mention. Try and do it amicably. Offer them something that's worth, you'll be better, even if you're going to pay them a little bit more than their stock is probably worth. You get rid of dragging them along and them taking a large percentage of the profits for absolutely contributing nothing. So you'll be better off in the long run. And if you do it amicably, you avoid the lawsuits. And if you bring lawyers into any situation to dissolve a company, it's going to cost you 4 times what it would if you just slightly overpaid to get out of that relationship. Right, Elon?
For me, it was early in my career when I realized that it was just as easy to pitch a client I wanted to work for as it was to pitch one I really didn't want to work for. When you're starting out, you'll take anybody. And I had a couple of circumstances where I got hooked up with a client that really wasn't a good fit. And I still tried my hardest to do the best I could. But when it came time to replace clients, or when I thought it was time for me to go out and pitch more, thinking, well, who do I really want to work for? If I'm actually getting to be good at this, maybe I have some control over that. So instead of looking for any client, I started looking for clients that shared my value system and the rest of the things that would make me happy to go on set and shoot stuff for them. And that was a big turning point for me. So it's just one thought as you're growing your business. Let's go to the next question.
Next question from Jesse Mills in San Francisco in the Bay Area. He says, how can people understand production companies in order to find experienced companies and avoid inexperienced companies? I ask because of the deluge of new virtual event companies.
Alex.
It's building a network. It is building a network of folks that do want to work together. A lot of times, when I'm saying, hey, I'm going to go do this thing that I want to experiment with, like the soccer games and everything else. As much as I'm trying to figure something out, I'm trying to figure out how the technology works. I'm trying to build a relationship with somebody that is connected to that. I'm also trying to meet people. So we put those things out, and who shows up, whether it's those kinds of things. So when I'm doing a lot of the things that I do pro bono, it's also me figuring out a technology, figuring out a workflow, and getting to know people that I may end up working for or with, or they may work for me, or whatever it is. I'm figuring all of those things out, and I do those all the time. And I'm talking to folks and trying to sort things out all the time. And I think that, you got to be part of that network. You're not going to be able to just educate people who don't know. You build the network, so you're the one that gets called.
Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot harder before the internet. Nowadays, if I want to check out a company that I've never heard of or never worked for before, like I say, go to see if they have a website. And a lot of times, if they're a competitive company, they will have lists of their past clients, as long as they're not doing top secret work or they have clients with NDAs in them that say that they cannot advertise the fact that they worked for that client. Check out what they've done in the past. Look at their reel that's posted online. You can do that passively without having to contact anybody at the company or stir up any bad vibes with you looking into their background. Do some searches on the heads of the company to see if they've got wants or warrants out, or see if they've had problems with financial problems or bankruptcies in the past. So, if you do your research, you can feel out a lot of the shysters that are out there that have learned how to put up a good website and put a bunch of fake stuff on it. There is occasionally you'll run across that. So do a little more research than just looking at the website, and make sure the credits that they're claiming were actually done by them. Just spot check them here and there. And then once they check out, then you can probably trust them.
Yeah, I will say it's more difficult, I think, in the fast emerging spaces. When desktop publishing was coming in, there were a lot of people who said they did it and they didn't, and they were still kind of in the old Linotronic area. And I've seen that over and over again in different areas. When a new technology comes out, suddenly everyone claims it. And has there been anything more like that recently than AI? Everybody and everything is now with AI. And so you have to figure out a way to figure out who actually has some depth in this relatively new thing. And, we get a sense of that from people like our own John Preto, who comes now and starts telling us about what he's learning and researching and working hard on. So we gain more and more confidence in the fact that he actually does have much better command than most of the other people I know in this new area, because he's working diligently to gain that command. It's different than just somebody saying, we're also a digital agency that can do SEO. And you find out, well, they read 2 articles and a book, and now they're purporting that they can do those things, and they actually have no depth in that. They're learning. Nothing wrong with learning, but you're getting a different thing when you get in somebody who's learning than somebody who's practicing it. Alex?
Yeah, and one of the things that is, one of the easiest ways to do this is also to provide content. So whether it's on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, other things, talking about it and posting little things about it. Now, I don't do most of those things because I do this. So this is my version of that. And people who come on, and when you're giving people advice and talking through those and serving your entire market with knowledge, you're also positioning yourself as someone who knows what they're talking about. It's actually why we have the whole system built the way we do here in office hours, is so that everyone can only has to answer the questions that they're experts at, that they're reported an expert at, rather than, and so that they're, so things like office hours or writing things out or posting those things is a great way to kind of also build up. One of the first big jobs I got paid a lot of money for was I wrote an article that I got paid almost nothing for, and it went on to, national syndication. And literally my client showed it to me. We were talking about something, and he said, "This is a great article on this." And I was like, "Yeah, I wrote that article." And, that generated a lot of work. so for me, yeah.
Yeah, never underestimate the power of your public face, because people do watch this stuff. Next question.
From Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard. What metrics do you use to make a choice to end a business relationship?
Tough question. Alex.
I don't end a lot of them, I have to admit. I will, oftentimes there's just a lot of work. And so it's a matter of where I'm prioritizing it or how I'm prioritizing, where I'm available, I think is a lot of times how I kind of hedge one way or the other. The only time we really get into a position where I need to end a business relationship is payment issues. So long, usually, not getting paid for a very, very, very long time, or just people being really like, again, if I feel like they're lying to me for some reason, those are places that I flat out lying or not paying the bills are the two things that for me are kind of the ones that I kind of set the line. But outside of that, it's mostly just a matter of who's going to do that job, whether it's going to be me or not, or whether I'm going to work on it or not.
Courtney, quick.
Yeah, the metric I use is how much sleep is lost. At night, if I find myself laying awake in bed going, those guys are just messing up left and right. And how am I going to deal with this? If I'm losing sleep every night over a business relationship, that's when it's time to cut the cord.
All right, we've got a couple more questions. Let's see if we can do them real quick before we finish up. Next question.
From Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. It says, would you ever sue to get paid or just take the loss? Is there a threshold for legal action?
Alex, what do you feel?
Coming from a family of lawyers, you never know what's going to happen when you open up that can of worms. And so I will not say that I would never sue, but I never have. I will do almost anything I can do in my power to not do that. And I will definitely not threaten it unless I'm going to do it. The mistake people make is that this, threatening legal action of any kind, whether it's I'm going to report you to the government or I'm going to sue you or whatever, that's a nuclear option. And when you say those things, you now are like, you're deciding I no longer want to work with that client or anyone around them, and I don't, and to be honest with you, when people swing that stick, everyone around them pays attention. Like this person is litigious, and litigious people have a tendency to not get hired. Because and so swinging that stick of I'm going to sue that person or whatever, you don't even want to say that around people because there's like, oh, that's going to be trouble. So just be very careful of those of doing that.
Let's get to the next question real quick.
Okay, yeah, I would never work with a client again if I had to sue them. What do you do to handle situations where client leadership is changing and many years of relationship is simply not there anymore?
I dealt with that, and I lost the client, and it's just there. It's going to happen occasionally. I mean, after 15 years with a client, the new administration came in. They went in another direction. There's not much you can do about it because generally the new owners clean house. Alice, do you have a quick thing you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest defense against that is you customize your client. You customize your services to the client to such a level that someone else coming in is not going to be able to achieve that result. And that is why I never do the same job the same way again. Like every single time I get a job, I'm turning screws to make it a little bit better. And I'm specializing it to that client and customizing it to that client so that I've definitely had ones where someone else was brought in, and that first show, because the client has all these expectations. Okay, we're going to do this and this and this because these are all things I did for them. It wasn't something I charged extra for. It wasn't something I talked to them about. I just started doing all these other things that I had figured out how to do affordably. It is a nightmare to walk into a situation where you're new with a new relationship, because it's usually not, everybody's not new. There's one new person who says, I want to bring in a new vendor. And that vendor, it's a briar patch that you've just created around everything you're doing, but you're doing it out of just continuing to add the services and add all the bits and pieces to that puzzle to make it really, really great for your client. And that's your best defense, in my opinion.
Courtney, you got a quick one?
Yeah, if you find that a new leadership comes in or the major company changes hands, a lot of times the new leaders will come in and clean house when they just don't realize what they're doing to establish relationships. I had a radio station I worked for, new management came in. He said, there's no place for part-time personnel at this company. Lay off, fire all the part-time personnel. The production manager did that. Then they quickly found out that 80% of their on-air staff was part-time. So they had no one to go on the air. So just lay back. If you find that's the situation, lay back. You may find out that they actually need you, and don't threaten to sue them or anything like that, because they may come back to you suddenly with the tail between their legs.
Let's get to the last question.
From Douglas Carmichael, many have said serendipitous interactions are a significant advantage of RTO. How much do those interactions factor into business relationships, and how can we leverage them?
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, being on site, this is a return to office. Being on site definitely gives you the opportunity to go out for lunch. and bring in lunch and talk to folks and so on and so forth. So the biggest thing is those casual conversations are very valuable, and so that's how you take advantage of that. But I think a lot of times just constant interaction and being responsive can equal some of that oftentimes. So it's a little bit of both.
So this takes us essentially to the end. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this. It's been fabulous. We'll be back tomorrow doing the same thing. We're a little bit past the top. So I'll just say thank you to everybody involved in this show. Thank you to the panelists. Without the experts showing up here every day to answer your questions, this becomes impossible. Thank you so much to all those of you who are in our audience who put in the questions that drive the show. We really appreciate it. And for the amazing behind-the-scenes crew who wake up every morning and put this show on the air. We truly appreciate your efforts. Without you, this is impossible. Don't forget, After Hours is available 24/7. We'll be back tomorrow morning, bright and early. So thank you for watching and listening to Office Hours. We'll see you tomorrow. Good to see you, Ronnie. Thanks for coming in all the way from Norway.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
I'm on my vacation now, so I have a lot of time to spend.
There we go.
Cool.
See you all week.
Come back tomorrow, please.
And thanks
Yeah,
to Courtney.
the day after, and the day after, and the day after.
You're welcome all week. Alex, I'm glad you had a good signal. I hope we'll see you for the rest of the week.
Did it break up too much, or was it okay?
No,
A little bit stuttery when the kids were playing video games, I think.
I'm hanging around there. Yeah, exactly. I think that's better. All right. See you.
No, see you tomorrow morning, I hope. Goodbye, everybody.